381 with Miss Mitzi Perdue. For those of you who normally listen on YouTube, you are not getting this episode today, Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021 p.m. Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021, 1:08 p.m. Eastern Time, because as of Saturday, the 27th, I've been suspended from YouTube for a week for discussing things I wasn't supposed to discuss about a supposed election that may or may not have happened in November of last year. And that's all I'll talk about it because I don't want to get suspended again. But if you're on BitChute, Rumble, or Spotify, you're getting the goods today, as always. So, Miss Mitzi Perdue, how are you doing?
Never better. Happy to be here. And, in grief over you being in YouTube jail. Darn.
I know, right? It's, you know what? I had someone tell me last night, because the woman I had on, Claire Lopez, former CIA agent, 20-year veteran.
I love. Oh, she's so great.
I love her. She's an angel. Claire Lopez, CIA agent, or former CIA agent, 20-year veteran. Someone told me last night, they're like, it sucks that you got banned from YouTube for a week, but they're like, they gave you internet street cred. And I was like,
yes.
They're like, how many people can say that they got their channel suspended because they had a CIA agent on who was talking about things.
By the way, don't mention what it is. The favorite word to describe something that you're not supposed to until YouTube figures this out is dwizabeam. She was talking about current dwizabeams.
Dwizabeam? I've never heard that.
Plural.
Dwizabeams, verbotens, wrongthink.
Yeah, I mean, it originally referred to one thing which we can't mention, but now it's a generic word. Okay. Dwizabeam is a generic word for something that the bots will pick up.
Okay, dwizabeam, verboten, wrongthink. So, for everybody listening, episodes 289, 291, and 370 have all been banned for dwizabeam, but they are available on Rumble, BitChute, and Spotify. So if, you think that you're an adult and that you can decide for yourself what is right and what is wrong, you can go listen to them. If you feel you need a supervisor or a chaperone, stay on YouTube. But today's episode...
Because Tommy Kerrigan is a dwizabeam grandmaster.
Perpetrator. Guilty of high dwizabeam.
And by the way, it was really literally did refer to one word that the censors would pick up, but now it's just generic.
Now it's a generic topic.
You've committed a dwizabeam.
I've committed a dwizabeam. I have been found guilty by the High Court of Big Tech, and I will be hung till I'm dead. Well, you know what? Okay. That's fine.
But boy, you have to love them, because I can remember I grew up in Boston, and boy, if a book was banned in Boston, if you're a writer, you just wanted this desperately, because that means that your book sales would soar. So let's hope the same thing happens with mass media.
Yeah, right. Someone said yesterday, they're like, it's kind of like when CDs would come out with the parental advisory sticker on. All that did was boost sales. So you know what? I'll take these suspensions. I'll take them with a smile. Thank you, YouTube. So today, Mitzi and I spoke sometime in early January, and we talking about her late husband, Frank Perdue, and began talking about his interest in Alexander Hamilton. And I thought it was interesting, and I know you can talk on any subject, so I was like, how about we do a podcast about that? And I think it's interesting about why him? Why was his interest in him? I mean, everyone has their own people that they're most interested in, that they follow the most. I like Curtis LeMay, but we all have our own interests, and to me it just seemed unique, not good, not bad, not right or wrong, just unique about Frank's apparent interest in Alexander Hamilton. So how about you take it away, Professor Perdue?
I'm grabbing it. It's mine. Okay, well, first of all, Frank absolutely adored Alexander Hamilton, enough so that we actually went to Nevis Island to see where Hamilton grew up. But Hamilton wasn't the only person who fascinated Frank. I would say that he was an almost omnivorous intelligence. He liked Andrew Carnegie enough so that he went to Dunfermline in Scotland to see where Carnegie grew up. I was with him on almost a pilgrimage throughout several European countries to see where Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Adams, all of them spent time in Europe. And we went to some of the places where they did their thing. So he was just, and he's very fascinated by Napoleon. So, of course, Napoleonic battlefields. He was deeply fascinated by history, and I think he took lessons from them. But since we started talking about Hamilton, I'll tell you what he admired about Hamilton.
Okay.
He admired Hamilton for just being, how about 100% self-made? Hamilton's background was, I think he was illegitimate. He was, in a somewhat remote Caribbean island, and yet he became a founding father of the whole United States. And I think it moved Frank deeply that somebody just through grit and will and vision and ability to execute. And for Frank, the vision alone is nothing. Ability to execute is something, but you put the two of them together and you've got genius. And so I think he just utterly admired Hamilton's genius. I think Frank was interested in economics. And one of Hamilton's sort of gifts to this country, and I'm not sure I can defend it as Frank would, but I'll do my best. Hamilton felt that it was actually good to have debt in the country, because that would be something that we could all unite around. There's the value of debt in that if it's being spent on something that makes you wealthier and better, great. But then another factor is if we all share in debt, for better or worse, that helps make it a United States rather than a Virginia or Massachusetts. It's, we're all in this together. And I think Frank could have defended that point of view at a more sophisticated level than I do. But I'm pretty sure that I'm directionally right.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes sense, though, right? As a business tycoon like Frank was, he would have to associate with that. He would have to identify with that, correct?
Yeah. But Frank, honest, he loved all the founding fathers. And towards the end of his life, let's say the last 5 years of his life, which was... There was a period where, because of Parkinson's, he couldn't read. And so we would listen to books on tape. And that meant that because I listened with him, pretty much got to listen to every current book on tape about a founding father. If we're going on a trip, if we're going on a walk, he loved studying the founding fathers. And by the way, how many titans of industry would actually travel to Europe to see the places where certain historic events happened?
Yeah, that's true, right?
With the founding fathers.
Yeah. It's true, but you're right. You can almost find, right? I imagine like Bill Belichick probably watches videos of like Vince Lombardi's coaching, right? If it's the same game being played, whether it's football or whether it's, maneuvering masses of wealth, it's the same game being played. So why not go back and look in history? That's no different than like looking at NFL films, right? You're just going back and...
Well, I love that way of looking at it because as far as I can tell, it's completely realistic.
Yeah.
He was something else I think people wouldn't expect about Frank Perdue. He was a student of military history, and I used to be just blown away by watching when he would be in the presence of generals or admirals, and he could maintain his own, discussing whether it was Alexander the Great or Civil War battles, or he's particularly fascinated by Napoleon because he felt that Napoleon had genius, he had charisma, he had vision, he certainly had the ability to execute. But Frank took a lesson from Napoleon of what not to do, somebody to be like the opposite of what you wanted to do. Because in the War of 1812, for everybody who happens to have studied the War of 1812, and we're talking Napoleon's invasion of Russia, not what was going on in this country, but in Napoleon's invasion of Russia, all of Napoleon's advisors said, don't do it, look out for the weather, look out for morale, look out for disease. Don't do it. You just don't need to do it. sit on all these wonderful things you've accomplished so far. Pretty much every one of Napoleon's advisors, including generals, secretaries, everybody said, don't do it. But Napoleon was so convinced of his own brilliance that he wouldn't listen to them. And the result was maybe one of the more smashing defeats in all of history. Mm-hmm. You know the word decimate, which means like 1 in 10?
Yeah.
Napoleon, the Grand Army of the Republic, I forget, could it have been 500,000 people who marched to Russia? 10,000 came back.
Jesus.
I mean, so it was a catastrophe on top of catastrophes. And, the lesson that Frank took from that is don't ever get so enamored with your own self that you stop listening to people. And I mean, isn't it just neat that somebody who had the responsibility of running a company that at that time employed 20,000 people, that he'd still take time to look at history and biography?
Well, it makes sense because, I mean, what you literally just said about Napoleon, don't get too big that you can't listen to others for advice. I mean, it would be the same thing if it was like Napoleon was good, but I run Perdue Chicken. It's the same thing. Don't get too big. It's like, so you have to go, by learning it, he's instantly negating that phenomena of getting too big, right? Hitler was a student of history to an extent. I mean, 130 years after Napoleon, he tried to invade Russia during the winter. It's the same thing. You get too big. Napoleon was an idiot. I'm the Third Reich. I have bombers and tanks, and it's same story, just different day.
But, Frank actually carried out in his life, and I got to witness it up close and personal, the idea of keep on listening to people. Don't think that you know it all. Mm-hmm. And one of his phrases was, none of us is, it's not unique to him, but nevertheless, it is something that he embraced. None of us is as smart as all of us.
Yes.
And so when he'd be in a meeting, and I got to see this over and over again, or how about continuously and almost without exception, I got to tag along on a lot of his business meetings, and I'm endlessly grateful for how that happened. But here's what I saw. He would go into a meeting, maybe there are 10, 20, 30 people there, and he made sure that nobody knew what direction he wanted to take. Because, if you're in the meeting with the big boss, the person whose name's on your paycheck, there's such a temptation just to twist yourself into a pretzel so that you say what you think the big guy's going to want to hear. Yeah. But Frank's attitude, and I heard him say this, I mean, he said it to me, there's a lot of wisdom in this room, a lot of talent and experience, and my job is to tap into it. And if they're trying to guess what I want, I'm going to miss out on it. Yeah. And so his approach was he'd do everything he could to have people not know what advice, what outcome he wanted. And he was perfectly willing to change his mind along the way. I mean, maybe he actually did want this outcome, but he could easily be talked into, if somebody made a good case, into changing his mind. He had great flexibility. And then he was very good at rewarding the people who argued with him. He had no use for yes men. And I'd love to share a favorite example that I have of this. And I wonder if the person who told me this story might be watching this, because I know that he's a friend of your father's. Okay. But here's the story. This man, he's in sales. And when he joined the company, and I think we're talking at least 30 years ago. Yeah, about 30 years ago. The week he joined the company, he saw something that made him think, oh no, I've joined this wonderful company and I was so happy to be hired, and it's all so wonderful. And here I've come the week that it all falls apart. And what did he mean by that? And of course, I asked him, and he said he was present at a sales meeting. And there were 8 people in the room. There were, like in this conference table, there were 3 on each side, and then Frank Perdue at one end, and a guy named Don Mabe at the other end of the table. And Frank and Don Mabe had been had been arguing at a level that this guy who had just joined the company had never heard top management argue like that in his life. And that's what was making him think, oh,
it's over.
A fight, yeah, it's over. A fight this big, how do you recover from it? And, it wasn't just a screaming match. At one point, Don Mabe took off his glasses, threw them down on the conference table, and by coincidence, those glasses bounced once and hit Frank Perdue right in the chest. And while the glasses, these reading glasses, Don Mabe's reading glasses, are on their in the air on their way to destiny with Frank Perdue's chest, Don Mabe is saying, why don't you just take up hang gliding? In other words, a life-threatening hobby.
Yeah, why don't you take up base jumping? Why don't you go swim with sharks?
Yeah, I mean, and okay, so again, the person who's telling me this, his first week in Purdue, and he sees an argument like that, and he's just sure this is irrecoverable. But to his amazement, actually, I believe Don Mabe got his way, and then he watched, in jaw-dropping amazement as Frank Perdue and Don Mabe walked out the door together, laughing and joking. And Frank respected Don Mabe for arguing. And I know that he respected Don Mabe so much that when Frank Perdue decided to retire from the presidency, he appointed as his successor the person who had argued most with him over the last 30 years, Don Mabe.
There's I think it's Eric Weinstein said, he talks about like nemesis, like the trope of the nemesis. And it's your nemesis is the person that you argue with the most, but it's also the person who is most competent to argue with you. And your nemesis is also, to fill all the categories, it also has to be, it's the person you want to beat so you can get the goal, whatever it is. But if you can't have it, you were not mad if the nemesis gets it. So it'd be like, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson or something, or the Yankees and the Red Sox. It's like you want to crush them to win the World Series. But if you can't win it and they do win it, you're not angry. You're not going to congratulate them, but it's just like you want, because they're the next best. So Eric Weinstein says about nemesis is it has to be someone that like you're going against, like throat again, you're going at each other's throats. But if one of you can't win, you want to see the other win because it's like you respect their like love for the game. So it seems like that's what it is, like nemesis.
Okay, and that you just used the exact words that were popping into my mind before you said it, and that is respect. I think Frank had endless respect for Don Mabe, first of all, because he did have good ideas, but second, I think Frank had respect for somebody who would stand up to him, for somebody who cared so much about the game that Don Mabe would stand up to Frank. And since Frank had no use whatsoever for yes men, it was a real smart career move on Don Mabe's part. Although I doubt if he did it as a career move. I mean, he did it because that was his character.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it'd be something that he did intentionally for that, because that just kind of, because if he was solely doing it as a career move, then there's a much easier way to do that. And a person that is liable to do something purely for a career move is probably going to be a yes man and not an arguer.
And Frank would have seen through it.
Exactly.
But I loved, to me, that was an example of Frank putting his ideology into practice. His ideology was Napoleon made a super catastrophic mistake by not listening to people. Frank listened to people. I mean, till the end of his days, he listened to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I try to do that with this podcast. Is I always try to, early on, it was even before I knew you, I had a guest. I think Dwayne Hughes. I think Dwayne's like 90, and he works at Sandia National Laboratory. And he told me after we spoke, he was like, it was very nice to speak to you. He was a young man, cut down on the swearing. And I remember in my mind, I was like, who is this old man telling me? But as it went on, and I remember you telling me, because you and I were watching TV. I think we were watching Trump talk.
Yeah.
And I remember he said, like, he said damn or bullshit or something. And, like, the crowd went crazy. And I remember you looked at me and you said, Tommy, you go, that's the importance of not swearing. And you're like, it's not because you need to be clean. It was like, when you abstain from it, when you do use it, it has the power of an atom bomb. And that's when I was like, okay, drop the ego. Who are these people telling me to stop swearing? So I was like, oh, there's a tactical use to it. It's not cut it out entirely. It's cut it out so when you do use it, it's, you know, it's a freight train. And that's
actually, and that's my approach to swearing, because I try to come off as ladylike and sweet and nice, as if I might not even know the words. But when I use one,
you gotta, yeah,
it has impact.
I think I heard my mom use the F word once in 30 years.
And you remember it. It has
still
impact.
Remember it. Yeah, I still remember exactly what it was. I was like, oh man. It was, yeah, you're right, it has an impact. And
yeah, don't rob the
word of their value.
The F-bomb of its bombliness.
Yeah, exactly. Don't turn it into just another adjective. Like, it's just like, what? You know, you just, yeah, now it's if you put an exclamation mark on everything, if you read everything in all caps, it doesn't, you know, it's kind of like when you see in the news, it's Senator whoever slams Senator so. It's like, I've seen that word on every article every day for 5 years. It doesn't mean anything anymore. So, on
the other hand, be proud of me with the word I just made up.
Yes.
We were talking about F-bombs. The bombliness.
The bombliness. That is Mitzi Perdue, 2021. Webster's
Dictionary. I am so proud of that. I don't know what to do with myself.
But you're right.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I'm proud of myself. But that's one thing I'm trying to do more, is not let my ego get in the, when I have, you know, I'll have friends give me feedback on the podcast, unsolicited feedback, but it'll be, and it always follows the same course of action. At first, I clam up and I'm like, who is this person telling me how to run my podcast? This is my podcast. And then once I kind of hear it more and I hear it more from other people, and then I finally realize through my thick head that no one's saying it as an insult or an attack. They're just objectively saying, hey, just my 2 cents. If you did this, it would come across a lot better. Now I start to look at it and I'm like, oh, okay. It's, no one's coming out to attack me. It's like but if my ego gets in the way of it, I can't look at actual advantageous constructive criticism, and instead it's just, oh, they're angry at me. And it's like, no, it's, again, that's why I bring on, like, my liberal friends, so I can, it's an exercise in lowering my ego. And it's like, you can't always be right. Like, literally, like, right politically, and, like, and also in, like, correctness. You can't also be correct. You can't always have the right answer.
You know, I sometimes write on what it takes to have a family last across the generations, because my family of origin, the Henderson family, began in 1840, 181 years ago. And among the things that I believe has kept us together, and there's a whole bunch of things, and I give talks on this, but one of them is kids have to learn that you can't always be right.
Yeah.
And for that matter, I'm against teaching people, at least in a family argument, I'm against standing on principle, because the moment you stand on principle, you're announcing to the world, I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to listen to the other side. I have closed my mind off.
I'm infallible.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I can think of some principles on whose hill I would die, but not many.
Yeah. It's that's a dangerous thing once you close it off. And I no longer am going to address that person because they're a Nazi. And it's like, what you've really said is, I'm now sealing off the door, and diplomatic relations are over. And it's like, that doesn't...
Actually, do you know how it looks to me when somebody says that? First of all, they're virtue signaling. Mm-hmm. And I believe virtue signaling is invariably wrong. And here's why. Because virtue signaling is... it's so ego-filled. It's so self-important.
Yeah.
It's so grabbing respect that you haven't done anything to earn.
Yeah.
So I'm totally against virtue signaling. Let's see, somebody who is, the case that you just get, I hate you, you're a horrible Nazi. That person is signaling that they're closed-minded. They are signaling that I think there's something wrong with them if they're so self-righteous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the self-righteous people I know, they, with just extraordinary frequency, the thing that they're self-righteous about is actually their secret vice.
Oh yeah, right. And it's, I mean, you see it again with, you see it now or 2020 and 2021. Trust the science. Just trust the science. And I agree, trust the science. But as a student of science who studied it nonstop for 4 years, if you often have to learn the history of the science. When you learn, like in Chemistry 101, you first learn all the centuries where they thought they had it right and they had it wrong, and just how wrong they were. So yes, it's trust the science, but also understand that every century the slate almost gets wiped clean and you realize just how wrong you were. So I mean, that's like, imagine saying in like the 1500s, I think one day maybe we can colonize another planet, and then you have everyone trust the science, it's a flat square, you moron. And it's like, dude, if you hide behind trust the science, like, it doesn't, the whole nature of science is just like, do not trust, like break it down again and again.
I mean, isn't that the essence of it? You come up with an idea and you try in every possible way to prove that it's not true.
Yeah, you try to invalidate it.
And then if it passes all the invalidations, maybe you've got something. But meanwhile, don't ever trust, because all right, a favorite example I have, and I think you know that I'm a science writer and a health writer for almost 40 years, which means that I have all sorts of opinions on science. I love it dearly with all my heart and soul. However, trust the science, not the politicized science. And my favorite example, remember the food pyramid?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Where very few fats, loads of carbohydrates at the bottom.
Yeah, now they know it should be upside down.
Yeah, but look what happened by trusting the science.
Diabetes.
A couple of generations of people trusted the science. The recommendations came in around 1980 for the food pyramid, maybe give or take a year, but that was the era when it started. That was also the era when exploding obesity began to take over the country, and actually the world for that matter. And with obesity comes heart disease, strokes, dementia, real early on diabetes, and then just all the misery that happens when you think that you're following the science and eating the diet that they recommend. You just get fatter and fatter and fatter.
Yeah.
And everybody, and my theory of why it took so long to uncover that this was backwards was because imagine that you're a scientist who has recommended this diet, which we now are pretty sure I'm not going to say in every case, but how about on a population level, led to just untold amounts of human suffering and deaths. You're a scientist who is proposing that. For you to admit that you are absolutely wrong, and I think I'll go with dead wrong, you can't admit it to yourself. Your mind's just going to protect yourself. And I would think that that's the essence of an example of cognitive dissonance. You have a belief and you can't let it go, because to let it go, you have to admit,
you're wrong.
I'm complicit in millions of deaths.
Yeah.
Now, who is a big enough person who would dare stare that fact in the face?
It's kind of like the doctors. Dr. Smith, like, I always rely on a lucky strike. Just 10 out of 10 doctors say it's the smoothest hit, and it's like, right? And now we have like X-ray scans on boxes of, at least in Australia, I know they put images of like destroyed lungs on the boxes, and it's like,
yay,
trust the science, dude. Just smoke the cigarette. Trust the science. And so it's, and we also go on.
Can I burst in, because I don't want to sound. I mean, the story I just told is going to sound anti-science, but that's not my view. My view is that what went wrong with politicized science then was it was awfully hard to undo a mistake, because unless you follow the old paradigm of the food pyramid, you're not going to get grants for your studies. You're not going to progress in your career. There was a whole ecosystem that was how about sitting on top of the science that kept the science from correcting itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also know, I think it came out in like 2017. It came out that that the I guess the grain and sugar industry was buying off Harvard scientists and Harvard doctors in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s to put out studies saying that these things didn't cause diabetes, which inadvertently led to the creation of the food pyramid. So we know from in history there are actual cases of doctors being bought off to just say this, because doctors in their white coats they're the high priests of the 21st century. So if we can get them to say something, you can then hide behind trust the science, and like that doesn't mean don't, I mean, definitely trust the science. Like, take a multivitamin, like wash your hands. If you have an exposed cut, put alcohol on it.
Actually, I'm not even in favor of multivitamins.
Okay, well, even then, it's still...
Well, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
You're so much better off just eating a healthy diet than taking a pill.
Yeah. Well, for those that can't afford it, they have to eat freezer meals, like multivitamins not bad.
Well, okay, I don't say they're bad, but given a choice, aim for real food.
Absolutely, yeah. It's aim for a good night's sleep and a workout, not necessarily waking up and eating or having 3 espressos. But the point is like it's very easy to hide behind trust the science, because if anyone argues against it, you're painted as a crazy person,
anti-science.
Oh, look at this guy's anti-science, and it's like, man, throughout history, the best scientists have been, quote-unquote, anti-science, science being assigned to the widespread belief of the day. So if the widespread belief of the day is that if you travel across the ocean from Britain, you're going to hit India, and you say, trust the science, well, Christopher Columbus, he didn't trust the science. Galileo didn't trust the science. Copernicus didn't trust the science. Joseph Lister, the antiseptic method, didn't trust the science. So to not trust the science, the best scientists in history didn't trust the science, because the thing they weren't trusting was named science. It wasn't objectively science.
Exactly. Oh, thank you for putting it into words, because I love science. I think science is just a gift from heaven. It's so useful, but I don't think we're talking science when you talk about a scientific consensus. Oh, no, don't judge by consensus. Judge by, are there people who will attack it? And my gosh, I'm just creating in my mind a connection between Napoleon, who was so convinced that he was right, that he made a horrible mistake. Well, what about if the scientists who won't allow anybody to question them, and you're going to get into banned. YouTube jail, or banned or silenced if you question them? Why isn't that just like Napoleon making a catastrophic mistake? When you don't have a feedback mechanism to uncover mistakes,
it's game over.
It's game over.
When you read your own press reports, I mean, Hitler's generals that disagreed with him or told him maybe you shouldn't invade the Soviet Union in the winter while you're fighting a Western front as well, they were fired or disappeared. So you quickly cull this herd and selectively breed for people who say yes, and then what happens? The whole thing collapses and he shoots himself in his bunker. Like, that's where it goes. So, man, if you have to not only say trust the science, but when someone else comes up and says, here's I think this is different, and how is that any different than putting, was it Copernicus? Who got one of them got house arrested, another one got burned at the stake. But the point is one of the famous, it's Galileo, I don't remember who, was in house arrest for the rest of his life under the Catholic Church. And it's like, man, if you can't even propose an alternative without just getting thrown in jail, that's insane.
In fact, I would say that it's almost a proof that whatever they're promoting is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Or at the very least, they're not open to it being wrong. Maybe it is right. And maybe it works.
But my feeling is, if it's right, they don't need to defend it so much.
Exactly. It's St. Augustine. I've said it a million times on this podcast. St. Augustine. The truth is like a lion. It need not be defended, only let out of the cage. It will.
I love that.
It'll ravage through the world. No one needs to defend that gravity is 9.81 meters per second squared. No one needs to defend it. If you don't believe me, like, just step out of your second story window. You're going to find out very quickly that that's exactly what it is.
And the other thing is, if I give a different definition of gravity that happens to be incorrect, the free marketplace of ideas is going to take care of it. I don't need to be banned or shadow banned or canceled.
You don't need to be ripped. Exactly. It will cancel it on itself. It will lose. No one has to say, McDonald's is the best place to go eat when you're drunk at 2 a.m. Like, no one needs to defend that thesis. When you're hammered drunk with your buddies and you're stumbling on a sidewalk and there's a 99-cent cheeseburger, you don't need to defend that thesis. You're going to get it.
I mean, that's certainly been my experience the last 5 times.
Yes, exactly. But that's what I mean, right? You don't need to defend. Nobody should get Burger King. Nobody should get Olive Garden. No one's sitting down for a nice meal when you're 12 shots of whiskey deep. You're getting the burger and fries. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to suppress anyone else. You don't need to ban Chick-fil-A or Burger King. You're just going to do it. And if it shifts, it shifts. And so the whole thing of trust the science is, yes, trust the objective science, but what are you labeling science? Just like YouTube, we have new standards that say that you cannot promote coordinated hate. On the surface, yeah, it sounds, sure, maybe your company, you don't want people hating, yeah, whatever, that's your company. I think it's a violation of free speech, but it's your company, okay. Could you define what hate is? No. Could you tell me who is defining hate? No, that's proprietary information. So what is hate? It's, you didn't follow the laws. The laws, well, what's the law? Well, if the law of the land is it's okay to own other human beings in like pre-1860s, well, now it's not. You're not following the law. The law, it's back to the founding fathers. If a law is unjust, it is your moral obligation to break the law. So who's defining what? So if it's trust the science, well, who's defining science? And furthermore, if that person defining quote science is also banning off platforms the digital town square that now, in the time of COVID, is the only town square available. If you just ban anyone that questions your science. And not only that, but the people pushing for other people to get banned are also the ones who are making a lot of money off vaccinations.
There's that. By the way, are we going to get Dwizzabeaned for this?
I don't know. I don't think so, because we haven't touched on the Holy of Holies.
On what Dwizzabean? We haven't given Dwizzabean language.
We haven't touched on the King Dwizzabean. We haven't touched on the big one, the verboten, that you cannot talk, or as I call it, the American Tiananmen Square. Because you can't, so that's just what it is. It didn't happen. We just can't talk about it. Unless, of course, you're on Rumble or BitChute or Spotify, you are now cleared, you are now read into the private program of what Dwizzabeam is. But if you're on YouTube, I'm sorry, you haven't been given that classification. But, yeah, it's an odd world, because now what else can you hide behind science as? When else can you say trust the science? How long until you have to, early on in 1933 in Germany, it was Nicholas Foschman says in his book KL, which I haven't even finished yet. It's a 33-hour audiobook. I started it last year and had to stop. But early on, with the people in what would become the concentration camps, first of all, they weren't concentration camps. They were temporary detainment facilities. And they were communists. And when the communists would go, you'd only have to go for like 48 to 72 hours. They would smoke with the guards. They'd play games. It was very much just like, hey, you're just kind of in timeout. And then every once in a while, they start to return home, and maybe 1 in 10 would have a black eye. And it would be like, oh, yeah, no, he got roughed up. And when you look at it from that mechanism, then you see how it just keeps dialing. Well, communist is an enemy to the state, and the Reichmark is going through hyperinflation. We have to do everything to defend the state. Okay, you get it, putting people back in work. But as you just dial it up more, well, now it's not just communists. Now it's threats to national security. Now it's anti-socials. Now it's and then you start changing the terms to what? Unhygienic, racially impure. And next thing you know, you're putting 6 million Jews on trains and bringing them to a walled-off field, and you're putting them in a gas chamber. And then you go, how did that happen? This is how it starts. The control of language. The control of language. You don't call it, hey, we're going to incinerate everyone of Judeo-Christian values. No, you start with, these communists have been antisocial troublemakers. And everyone goes, well, I don't want to be an antisocial troublemaker. I trust the science. That's coordinated hate. If he got banned from YouTube, he should be banned from YouTube. How do you think it starts? It doesn't.
Just like this. Just like this.
Yeah. And then when you start to realize, why do they want your guns? It's probably because they're going to do something that warrants your response to include a gun, right? If someone wants to take your... If I'm going, Mitzi, just get rid of your gun.
By the way, are we on a Dwizabinian subject?
I don't know yet. We're going to find out. We're going to find out this Sunday when I can upload episodes again. I think... So far, I don't... But even there...
By the way, let's use for... I'm making a symbol now. Can you guess?
I think we can talk about...
Okay, that's a Dwizabin.
Okay. No, I don't think it is yet.
No?
No, because I've only gotten banned for one topic. Now, mind you, when they started censoring, they started with Alex Jones 3 years ago, and then they went to Milo Yiannopoulos, on and on and on. Next thing you know, President Trump. How does it happen? Well, you start with one, and then you move it forward. So what are we doing now? We cannot discuss an event that happened in the United States on November 3rd, 2020. Okay, well, now that they have... Once they banned Alex Jones, the importance wasn't that they banned Alex Jones. It was that they were able to do a coordinated ban of an individual. It doesn't matter who that individual was or what the reasoning was for. Once it became normalized that someone can be deplatformed, then the floodgates are open, and a couple years later you get President Trump gone. So what we're seeing now is it's not just... I try not to get distracted as to why I got a suspension discussing an election. That's not the important thing. You might be wondering, how is it not important? It is important. No, it's not. It's the fact that now it's not individuals who are being banned. There is now a new threshold, a topic. And now that they can set that precedent of you get banned if you discuss this topic, I would bet my life savings, though paltry, that soon the next topic will be COVID vaccinations. I think it'll probably be a couple months. But now you're going to have two topics. Now you're going to have two topics that you cannot discuss. After that,
and it grows. I mean, it's like a cancer.
And then very soon it's going to be, if you mention the Republican Party, you're canceled. And you're going to go, how did this start? And you're going to go, well, it started with one little thing. But that is their new thing, is there's now a topic that you can't discuss.
Wow.
We got to wrap this one up, though, Mitzi, because I have on, after this, I have Derek Gibson, who's running for governor of New York to replace Cuomo.
I love it.
This podcast.
Well, I had a super time, and
as always,
I have to tell you something. A great disappointment. You ready for a great disappointment?
I don't think I have a choice.
How did you guess? No, I have ordered one of your T-shirts, and it didn't come in time.
What? Well, now I am ashamed of myself.
Oh, well, no, hey, the order was recent.
I thought the one...
we ordered one for my son.
Yes.
Okay, and then I thought, I'd really like another one, and I want to wear it.
When was that?
So I asked the person who works with me to order it, and I asked her yesterday morning. I'm not sure when the order got in.
I don't think it's been in.
But obviously not in time to show it off here. I wanted to model it.
I am ashamed of myself, Mitzi, and I apologize. I will get on that immediately. Unfortunately, there are no employees, so it's just going to be me yelling at me. I'm going to go put on my merch hat, and I'm going to start yelling at myself. What are you doing? And then I'll take the merch hat off, and I'll, like a true sane person.
Like the rest of us. Okay, go get ready for your fabulous next interview.
Okay.
And when we see each other next, I will be wearing something really fashionable.
Yes. Thank you, Mitzi. As always, I love you. Thank you for coming on, and I'll text you when it's up. And I will also get to the merch thing as soon as the next episode's over.
Woohoo! Okay, I can't wait. Thank you.
Mitzi. Thank you so much. All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.